They say love is blind, but in Liam Calloway's case, ambition was the blinder. He thought he was discarding a dead weight, a simple, unambitious housewife who didn't fit his rising status as New York's sharpest hedge fund manager. When he tossed the divorce papers across the mahogany table, mocking her for her lack of pedigree and handing her a pity check to survive the winter, he thought he had won. He had no idea that the woman sitting quietly across from him, Julianne, wasn't just a housewife. She was the sole heiress to the vain sovereign trust, a $3 trillion shadow empire that owned the very building they were sitting in. Liam didn't just sign divorce papers, he signed his own death warrant. The rain in Manhattan didn't wash away the grime, it just made the city slick and treacherous. Inside the 45th floor conference room of Giles Prentice and Associates, the atmosphere was drier than a bone and twice as brittle. Liam Calloway adjusted his bespoke Italian silk tie, catching his reflection in the floor-to-ceiling window. He looked every inch the man of the year a title Forbes had hesitantly floated the week prior. 34 years old jawline like a cliff edge and eyes that assessed people like assets to be liquidated. Sitting opposite him was Julianne. Jules. She wore a beige trench coat that had seen better days. Her hair pulled back in a messy bun that Liam used to find endearing, but now found indicative of her lack of drive. She looked small in the oversized leather chair. She looked average. And average was the one thing Liam Calloway could no longer afford. "Let's speed this up, Preston," Liam said, checking his Patek Philippe watch. "I have a dinner reservation at Le Bernardin in an hour. Sloane hates waiting." The lawyer, Preston Giles, shifted uncomfortably. He was an old man who had seen many divorces, but the coldness of this one unsettled him. "Mr. Calloway, are you certain about the waiver of the non-disclosure regarding the assets? The alimony is generous." Liam interrupted, his voice smooth, devoid of any emotional jagged edges. He slid a folder across the table toward Jules. $50,000, Jules. A lump sum. No monthly payments. I want a clean break. No strings, no clawbacks. Jules looked at the folder, then up at him. Her blue eyes were eerily calm. There were no tears. There had been tears 6 months ago when he stopped coming home. There had been sobbing 3 months ago when she found the second phone. But now, there was only a terrifying stillness. 50,000, Jules repeated softly. For 5 years of marriage. That's 10,000 a year, Liam. You spent 12,000 on that watch last week. Liam sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. He leaned forward, flashing the smile that charmed investors. Jules, look at it realistically. You don't work. You haven't worked since we met. You edit a few manuscripts here and there, but let's be honest. I've been carrying us. I'm moving into a different sphere now. Calloway Capital is merging with the Kincaid Group. I need a partner who understands that world. Sloane Kincaid understands it because she was born in it. He paused, letting the cruelty land. You're a sweet girl, Jules, but you're small town. You're plain. You're an anchor, and I'm a rocket. I'm cutting the line so you don't drown in my wake. Frankly, 50,000 is charity considering you signed the prenup. The prenup? Jules remembered it. She had signed it blindly drunk on love, believing Liam when he said it was just standard procedure for his startup. I'm not asking for your money, Liam, Jules said, her voice steady. I'm asking if you remember the vows, for poorer. Liam laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. We aren't poor anymore, Jules. I'm not. You, on the other hand, well, 50,000 is a lot of money in the suburbs. You can get a nice apartment in Jersey. Maybe go back to school, learn a trade. He pulled a fountain pen from his pocket, a Mont Blanc she had bought him for his first big promotion, saving for 6 months to afford it. He uncapped it and signed the papers with a flourish. Liam J. Calloway. He pushed the papers toward her. Sign it, Jules. Don't make this ugly. If you fight me, I'll bury you in legal fees until that 50,000 is gone and you're sleeping in a shelter. Jules stared at the signature. She thought about the last 5 years, the nights she stayed up helping him write pitch decks when his English was too technical, the way she nursed him through the stress-induced ulcers. The fact that she had introduced him to the angel investor who gave him his first million, an investor she claimed was a friend of a friend, but was actually her father's personal accountant. She had kept her secret to protect him, to ensure he was loved for him, not the Vane trillions. Her father, Alexander Vane, the patriarch of the oldest, most secretive banking dynasty in Europe, had warned her. He loves the reflection of himself in your eyes, Julianne. Not you. She hadn't listened. Now the check for $50,000 sat on the table like a tombstone. Jules picked up the cheap plastic pen provided by the lawyer. She didn't hesitate. She didn't shake. Julianne Vane Calloway. There, she whispered. Liam stood up immediately, buttoning his jacket. Smart choice. The check is in the folder. Take care of yourself, Jules. Really. He didn't look back. He walked out of the conference room, the heavy oak doors thudding shut behind him, already dialing Sloane on his phone. The lawyer, Preston, looked at Jules with pity. Mrs. Calloway, if you need a ride to the station. Jules stood up. The slouch was gone. The average demeanor evaporated like mist. She straightened her spine, and suddenly the trench coat didn't look old. It looked like vintage chic. Her eyes turned from soft blue to the color of frozen ice. That won't be necessary, Mr. Giles, she said, her voice dropping an octave, losing the subservient tremor she had adopted for Liam's sake. But I do have one request. Yes, keep that file open. You'll be hearing from my counsel in the morning. Your counsel. But you just signed. Jules picked up the $50,000 check. She looked at it for a second, then ripped it precisely in half, then into quarters, letting the confetti rain down onto the mahogany table. I didn't sign for the money, Preston. I signed to sever the conflict of interest. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the brass handle. Tell Liam he should enjoy Le Bernardin tonight. It's the last meal he'll enjoy in this town. Liam stepped out into the crisp evening air, feeling lighter than he had in years. The rain had stopped, leaving the New York streets glistening under the streetlights. A black town car idled at the curb. The rear window rolled down, revealing Sloane Kincaid. Sloane was everything Jules wasn't. Sharp angles, designer labels, and a laugh that sounded like champagne flutes clinking. She was the daughter of Robert Kincaid, the CEO of the investment firm Liam was desperate to merge with. Done? She asked, arching a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Done? Liam said, sliding in beside her and kissing her cheek. Signed, sealed, and delivered. She took the buyout. 50K. Sloane scoffed, tapping her manicured nails on her clutch. God, that's tragic. I almost feel bad for her. What is she going to do? Move back to Ohio, probably, Liam said, waving his hand dismissively. It doesn't matter. She's the past. You and I, Sloane. We're the IPO. As the town car merged into traffic, Liam didn't notice the vehicle pulling up to the curb where he had just stood. It wasn't a taxi. It wasn't an Uber. It was a Rolls-Royce Phantom, painted a deep midnight blue that looked almost black. The license plate was simple V1. The driver, a man named Arthur, with shoulders like a linebacker and a suit that cost more than Liam's car, stepped out and opened the rear door with a bow. He held a large black umbrella, though the rain had stopped a sign of deference. Jules walked out of the building. She tossed the beige trench coat into a nearby trash can. Underneath, she wore a simple black dress, but the cut was unmistakable custom Givenchy. "Good evening, Miss Vane," Arthur said, his voice gravelly and warm. "Your father sends his regards. He has been monitoring the situation." "I'm sure he has, Arthur," Jules said, sliding into the leather interior that smelled of cedar and old money. "Take me to the airstrip. The jet is ready." "Fueled and waiting, ma'am. We are heading to Zurich." "No," Jules said, pulling a compact mirror from her purse. She wiped off the modest pale lipstick she wore for Liam, replacing it with a deep blood-red shade. "We're staying in New York. Take me to the penthouse at the Pierre, and call the board of directors of the Sovereign Trust. Wake them up if you have to." Arthur met her eyes in the rearview mirror. He grinned. "It's 300 a.m. in Zurich, Miss Vane." "I don't care what time it is in Zurich. I care what time it is on Wall Street. Initiate protocol, clean slate." "And regarding Mr. Calloway?" Jules looked out the window as they passed a massive digital billboard in Times Square. It showed Liam's face smiling confidently under the headline, "Rising Stars of Finance, Calloway Capital, projected to triple earnings." "Block his trades," Jules said coldly. "Not all of them, just the ones that matter. I want him to feel the wind change direction before the storm hits. And Arthur, yes, Miss Vane, find out who holds the debt on his merger with Kincaid Group." "I believe we do, ma'am, through a shell company in the Caymans, Blackwood Holdings." Jules smiled, but it was a smile that would have made Liam freeze in his tracks. "Good. Call in the loan, tomorrow morning. Full repayment within 48 hours. That will bankrupt him, ma'am. He's over-leveraged. He wanted a wife who understood high finance," Jules said, leaning back as the car accelerated effortlessly. "I'm just giving him an education." Meanwhile, at Le Bernardin, the mood was celebratory. Liam and Sloane were seated at the best table in the house. Robert Kincaid, Sloane's father, a bulbous man with a red face and a cigar habit he couldn't kick, raised a glass. "To the merger," Robert boomed. "Calloway, you're a shark. I like sharks. You cut the dead weight today. That shows me you have the stomach for the big leagues. Divorce is ugly but necessary. Business before sentiment." "Always, Robert," Liam agreed, clinking his glass. It was a strategic correction. Jules was. She was a nice girl, but she lacked vision. She was content with mediocrity. "Mediocrity is a disease," Sloane purred, trailing a hand down Liam's arm. "You're cured now." Liam's phone buzzed on the table. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again. "Take it," Robert said, taking a bite of his tuna tartare. "Might be money calling." Liam chuckled. "Excuse me for a moment." He picked up the phone. It was his CFO, aggressive and usually calm. Now he sounded like he was hyperventilating. "Liam, you need to get to the office." "I'm at dinner with Kincaid." "Relax, Jerry." "What is it?" "It's Blackwood Holdings, the primary lender for the Kincaid leverage package." "What about them?" "We have a 10-year repayment plan, low interest." "Not anymore. They just invoked the change of circumstance clause. They're claiming the merger alters the risk profile. They've called the loan Liam, the full 40 million, due in 48 hours. Liam froze. The ambient noise of the restaurant faded into a high-pitched ring. "That's impossible. Read the contract. What change of circumstance? I don't know, Jerry screamed. But the fax came through 5 minutes ago, and Liam, the letterhead. It's not just Blackwood. It's countersigned by the parent guarantor. Who is the guarantor? Liam hissed, turning away from the table so Sloane wouldn't see the sweat breaking out on his forehead. It's the Vane Sovereign Trust. Liam blinked. He knew the name. Everyone in finance knew the name. It was a myth, a ghost story. The Vanes were the people who bailed out countries, not companies. Why would the Vane Trust care about a $40 million loan in New York? Liam whispered. I don't know, but they do. And Liam, they froze our operating accounts pending an audit. Our credit cards are dead. All of them. Liam looked back at the table. The waiter had just brought a bottle of vintage Dom Perignon, popping the cork with a festive pop. Sloane was laughing. Robert was smiling. The bill for tonight would be over $2,000. And Liam realized with a sickening lurch of his stomach that he didn't have a working credit card to pay for it. Fix it, Jerry, Liam snapped, hanging up. But his hand was shaking. He walked back to the table, forcing a smile that felt like plastic. Everything all right, darling? Sloane asked. Fine, Liam lied. Just some technical issues with the servers. Boring it stuff. To the future, Robert toasted again. To the future, Liam echoed, raising his glass. But as he drank, the champagne tasted like vinegar. Somewhere out there in the dark machinery of the financial world, a gear had turned. He didn't know why, and he didn't know how, but he felt the sudden terrifying sensation of being watched. And in the penthouse of the Pierre Hotel, Julianne Vane stood on the balcony, looking down at the city lights, swirling a glass of whiskey that cost more than Liam's annual salary. Let the games begin, she whispered to the wind. The silence at the table in Le Bernardin was louder than a scream. The waiter, a young man with impeccable posture and a pitying expression, held the small leather folder as if it contained a contagious disease. I apologize, monsieur. The waiter said, his voice barely a whisper, discreet enough that the neighboring tables wouldn't hear, but loud enough that Robert Kincaid definitely did. The card was declined. Code 05. Do not honor. Liam felt the blood drain from his face, pooling somewhere in his feet. That's ridiculous. He laughed, a dry, brittle sound. It's a black card. There's no limit. Swipe it again. I have tried 3 times, monsieur. And the secondary card as well. Perhaps a fraud alert. Sloane let out a huff of breath, rolling her eyes toward the ceiling. Oh, for heaven's sake, Liam. Did you forget to pay the bill? How pedestrian. It's not the bill, Sloane. Liam snapped, his composure cracking. It's a bank error. I just merged with your father's company. My liquidity is fine. Robert Kincaid wasn't smiling anymore. He looked at Liam with the eyes of a man who measured worth in liquidity. A man who couldn't pay for dinner was a man who couldn't be trusted with a merger. Here, Robert grunted, tossing his own Amex Platinum onto the tray. I'll get it. We can consider it a loan. Add it to the merger negotiations. Robert, no, I insist, Liam started. Don't. Robert cut him off, his voice hard. You've got a liquidity problem, Calloway. Fix it. Before the market opens tomorrow. If you can't buy a bottle of champagne, how the hell are you going to buy my company's debt? The ride to Sloane's penthouse was silent. Liam sat in the dark, furiously texting Jerry, his CFO. Liam. Why are my personal accounts frozen? Jerry. It's not just personal, it's corporate. The SEC just flagged a suspicious irregularity in our filings from 3 years ago. Who filed the complaint? Liam, I don't know. You tell me when the car stopped, Sloane didn't invite him up. Go home, Liam, she said, checking her reflection in the window. Daddy is worried. And when Daddy is worried, I get cut off. Fix this. Call me when you're rich again. Liam stood on the sidewalk, rain beginning to fall again, watching the tail lights of the town car fade. He hailed a taxi, but then remembered he had no cash and no working cards. He walked. He walked 40 blocks in the rain to the apartment he used to share with Jules. He expected to find it empty, a hollow shell to match his mood. But when he arrived, the doorman who usually greeted him with a salute blocked his path. Mr. Calloway, the doorman said, looking uncomfortable. I can't let you up. What do you mean I own the damn penthouse? Not anymore, sir. The lease was in Mrs. Calloway's name. The building management received a notice of termination an hour ago. The locks have been changed. Your personal effects have been relocated. Relocated where? Liam roared, grabbing the doorman by the lapels. To the curb, sir! Around the back! Liam ran to the service entrance. There, in the wet alleyway, were 6 cardboard boxes, soaking wet, his suits, his awards, his expensive watches tossed in a heap like garbage. Sitting on top of the wet cardboard was a single white envelope. It was dry, protected by a plastic sleeve. Liam tore it open. Inside was a note written in elegant looping cursive. I took the apartment. You kept the debt. Seems fair. J. Liam stared at the note, his hands shaking with rage. Jules. It had to be Jules. But how? She was a nobody, a small-town girl who clipped coupons. How could she freeze his assets? How could she evict him? Unless she wasn't doing it alone. Preston, Liam muttered, thinking of his lawyer. She must have slept with the lawyer. He gathered his wet suits, humiliation burning in his chest like acid. He would destroy her. He would find whatever loophole she used, and he would crush her. But first, he needed a place to sleep. While Liam was checking into a cheap motel in Queens, using the last $100 of emergency cash he kept in his shoe. Julianne Vane was sitting in the library of the Vane estate in the Hamptons. The room was vast-filled with first editions and the smell of burning birchwood. Her father, Alexander Vane, sat in a wing-back chair, an oxygen tube in his nose, looking frail but sharp as a razor. You've started the war. Alexander wheezed, a small smile playing on his lips. I saw the ticker. Calloway Capital is down 12% in after-hours trading. It's just the beginning, Papa, Jules said. She was wearing a silk robe, sipping herbal tea. The average housewife was gone. In her place was the woman who had been tutored in macroeconomics since she was 6 years old. He hurt you, Alexander said. It wasn't a question. He dismissed me, Jules corrected. He treated me like an accessory that had gone out of style. I don't mind that he stopped loving me, Papa. Love fades. I mind that he thought I was stupid. He mocked my education. He mocked my family. He didn't know your family. Alexander chuckled. He never asked, Jules said softly. In 5 years, he never once asked to meet my parents. He just assumed we were poor because I didn't wear logos. He assumes value is visible. I'm going to teach him that the most dangerous things are the ones you can't see. Arthur the butler and head of security entered the room with a tablet. Miss Vane, Arthur said. Update on Mr. Calloway. He is currently staying at the Motel 6 near LaGuardia. He is trying to reach his investors, but we've blocked the calls at the carrier level. Good, Jules said. What about the Kincaid merger? Robert Kincaid is getting cold feet. He's looking for a new buyer for the debt." Jules stood up, walking to the window. The ocean crashed against the cliffs below, a relentless force of nature. "Arthur, prepare the helicopter. We have a meeting with Robert Kincaid in the morning." "You want to buy the Kincaid Group?" Arthur asked, surprised. "No." Jules turned her eyes, flashing. "I want to buy the debt. I want to own the leash around Liam's neck, and tomorrow night is the Sovereign Gala. I think it's time Mrs. Calloway made her debut." The next morning, Liam Calloway woke up to the smell of stale cigarettes and regret. The motel room was hideous. He put on the least wetsuit he had shaved, with a disposable razor that nicked his chin, and took a cab to his office. When he arrived at Calloway Capital, the floor was in chaos. Phones were ringing off the hook. Analysts were shouting. Jerry ran up to him looking like he hadn't slept in a week. "Liam!" "Thank God, it's a bloodbath. The Blackwood loan, they sold it." "Sold it." Liam loosened his tie. "To who? If it's a standard bank, we can negotiate." "That's the problem. It wasn't a bank. It was a private trust. We don't know who. But they sent a demand letter. They want immediate repayment, or they convert the debt to equity." "If they convert to equity," Liam did the math in his head, his stomach dropping, "they would own 51% of the company. It's a hostile takeover." "Exactly. And Liam, the Kincaid deal is dead. Robert pulled out this morning. He said he found a more stable partner." Liam slammed his fist onto his desk, cracking the glass surface. "Who is doing this? Is it Goldman? Is it the Russians?" "We don't know, but there is one chance," Jerry said, pulling up a web page on his tablet. "Tonight, the Sovereign Gala at the Met. Everyone who is anyone in global finance will be there. The rumor is that the chairman of the Vane Sovereign Trust will be making a rare public appearance." "The Vane Trust," Liam muttered. "The ones who guaranteed the Blackwood loan. If I can get to them, explain that this is all a misunderstanding, maybe I can save the company. Tickets are $5,000, Liam, and we don't have corporate cards." Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out his Rolex Daytona. "Pawn this, get me a ticket, and get me a tuxedo. I don't care if you have to steal it." The Metropolitan Museum of Art was transformed. The Temple of Dendur was bathed in gold light. Champagne flowed like water. The air smelled of expensive perfume and desperation. Liam Calloway arrived wearing a tuxedo that fit slightly too tight in the shoulders, a rental. He felt naked without his entourage, without Sloane on his arm. He scanned the room, looking for the power players. He saw the CEO of J.P. Morgan. He saw senators. He saw tech moguls. But he was looking for the Vanes. "Liam!" He turned. It was Sloane. She looked radiant in a red dress, but her expression was cold. She was standing next to her father, Robert. "Sloane." "Robert." Liam forced a smile. "I'm glad I ran into you. About the merger." "There is no merger, Calloway." Robert grunted, sipping a scotch. "I sold the firm this afternoon." "Sold it to whom?" "To a private holding company. Maximum liquidity. Cash offer. Double the valuation you gave me. I'd be an idiot to say no." "Who has that kind of cash?" Liam demanded. Suddenly the room went quiet. The chatter died down. The orchestra stopped playing. At the top of the grand staircase, a spotlight hit the entrance. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed, "the chairwoman of the Vane Sovereign Trust." Liam looked up, squinting against the light. A woman stepped out. She wore a gown of emerald green velvet that hugged her curves like a second skin. Diamonds, real heavy vintage diamonds, glittered at her throat and ears. Her hair was cascading in waves, no longer bound in a messy bun. She descended the stairs with the grace of a queen and the predator gaze of a lioness. Liam blinked. He rubbed his eyes. It looked like Jules. But it couldn't be Jules. Jules wore sweatpants. Jules apologized when she bumped into furniture. Jules thought a $50 wine was a splurge. This woman commanded the room. As she reached the bottom of the stairs, the crowd parted. Billionaires bowed their heads. Robert Kincaid stepped forward, looking like an eager puppy. "Madame Chairwoman," Robert said, bowing low. "An honor." "Truly." The woman stopped. She turned her head slowly. Her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Liam. Liam felt a shockwave go through his body. Those eyes. He knew those blue eyes. He had looked into them for 5 years. "Jules," he whispered. She walked toward him. The crowd murmured. Why was the heiress of the world's largest fortune walking toward the disgraced hedge fund manager? She stopped 3 feet away from him. The scent of her perfume, jasmine and oud, hit him. It was the same perfume she wore on their first date, but concentrated expensive. "Hello, Liam," she said. Her voice was smooth, cultured, stripping away the Midwestern accent she had faked for years. "Jules, what are you doing here? Did you marry someone?" Liam stammered, his brain unable to process the visual data. "How did you get in?" The crowd laughed. A ripple of amusement went through the elite. "How did I get in?" Jules repeated, a small, cruel smile playing on her lips. "Liam, look at the floor." Liam looked down, the marble floor of the Met. "I don't understand." "Look at the donor wall." She pointed to the massive stone slab behind them. Liam turned. At the very top, engraved in gold leaf larger than any other name, the Vane family. "I didn't get in, Liam," she whispered, leaning close so only he could hear. "I built the door." You're a Vane," Liam choked out. "The Vane Trust. But you're from Ohio. Your dad is a retired teacher." "My father is Alexander Vane. He retired from teaching. The global banking system, how to operate," she corrected. "We live in Ohio because we value privacy, something you never understood." Liam felt his knees buckle. The realization hit him like a freight train. The prenup, the $50,000, the pity check. He had divorced the richest woman in the world, and he had given her $50,000 to go away. "Jules, wait," Liam scrambled, his survival instinct kicking in. "Baby, please, we need to talk. This is crazy. I didn't know. Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted to see if you loved me," she said, her voice raising so the crowd could hear. "Or if you just loved the lifestyle I could buy you. I got my answer yesterday." "I made a mistake," Liam pleaded, reaching for her hand. Arthur, the security chief, stepped out of the shadows, blocking Liam's arm with a grip like steel. "Don't touch her," Arthur growled. Jules waved Arthur back. "It's okay, Arthur. He's harmless. He's insolvent." She looked at Robert Kincaid. "Mr. Kincaid, is the acquisition of Callaway Capital complete?" "Yes, madame," Robert beamed. "We executed the debt-to-equity swap 10 minutes ago. The Vane Trust now owns 51% of Callaway Capital." Liam spun around to look at Robert. "You sold my company to her. Business is business, Liam." Robert shrugged. Jules stepped closer to Liam. "You said you wanted a partner who understood high finance, Liam. You said I was an anchor. Well, now I'm the captain, and I'm afraid I have some bad news regarding your employment." "You can't fire me," Liam hissed. I'm the founder. Read your bylaws, Jules said coolly. The majority shareholder can remove the CEO for gross incompetence or reputational damage. Being publicly dumped by your mistress and evicted from your apartment in the same week, that's very damaging to the brand. She snapped her fingers. A waiter appeared with a glass of champagne. She took it, took a sip, and then handed the half-empty glass to Liam. Here, she said, a pity drink, to survive the winter. She turned her back on him. Arthur, have him escorted out. He's trespassing. Jules. You can't do this, Liam screamed as 2 security guards grabbed his arms. I'm your husband. The papers aren't final yet. I'll contest the divorce. I'll take half. I'll take half of everything. Jules stopped. She turned back one last time. The room was deadly silent. You signed the waiver, Liam, she said, her voice ice cold. Full disclosure was waived by you. You wanted a quick break. You wanted no clawbacks. You signed away your claim to the Vane fortune for $50,000. She smiled a dazzling, terrifying smile. You made the deal of a lifetime, Liam. Just not for you. As the guards dragged Liam kicking and screaming toward the exit, passing the staring elites of New York society, he saw Sloane Kincaid turn away from him, sipping her drink, pretending she had never met him. Liam Calloway was thrown out onto the concrete steps of the Met. The heavy doors slammed shut. He was alone. It was raining. And he realized with a horror that went bone deep that the $50,000 check he had given her, he had ripped up the carbon copy. He didn't even have that. The weeks following the gala were a slow, suffocating descent for Liam Calloway. The fall from grace wasn't a sudden crash. It was a systematic dismantling of his existence. He was staying in a cramped studio apartment in Hell's Kitchen, a far cry from the glass-walled penthouse he had grown accustomed to. The rent was paid with the proceeds from pawning his collection of vintage watches, the only assets the auditors hadn't seized during the hostile takeover of Calloway Capital. Liam tried to get back in the game. He had a resume that on paper should have had headhunters breaking down his door. He had built a firm from nothing. He had generated 30% returns. He was a shark. But every door was locked. He sat in the lobby of Sterling & Co., a mid-tier investment bank, waiting for an interview with an old college buddy, Mark Benson. Mark owed him. Liam had covered for Mark's trading errors back in their junior analyst days. After 40 minutes, Mark's assistant, a woman who looked at Liam's slightly fraying cuffs with disdain, walked over. Mr. Benson is unavailable. I can see him through the glass, Liam said, pointing to the office where Mark was studiously avoiding eye contact. Tell him it's Liam. He knows who you are, Mr. Calloway, the assistant said, her voice lowering. And that's the problem. We received a memo. A memo from the compliance department. Any entity associated with the Vane Sovereign Trust or its subsidiaries, which includes our liquidity providers, is forbidden from hiring you. If we hire you, they pull our credit lines. Liam stood up, his face flushing red. That's illegal. That's blacklisting. It's risk management, she corrected. You're a liability, Liam. You're radioactive. Liam stormed out, the humiliation burning his throat. It was the same everywhere. The Vane reach was infinite. They didn't just own banks. They owned the infrastructure of the financial world. They owned the pipes the money flowed through. Desperation breeds delusion. Liam began to convince himself that he wasn't the villain of this story. He was the victim. Jules had tricked him. She had committed fraud. She had presented herself as a pauper to entrap him into a prenup that was unconscionable. He needed leverage, and since he couldn't afford a high-powered lawyer, he went to the dregs. He found Silas Vork in a basement office in Queens that smelled of mildew and fried onions. Vork was a private investigator who had lost his license 3 years ago for wiretapping, but kept working off the books. "You want dirt on the Vane family?" Vork laughed, a wheezing sound, as he lit a cheap cigarette. "Buddy, that's like asking for dirt on the Pope. People who try to dig up the veins usually end up in car accidents." "I don't need dirt on the family," Liam said, leaning over the stained desk. "I need dirt on Julianne, specifically the time before we met. She said she was a freelance editor. She said she was struggling. If I can prove she was actively managing Vane assets while pretending to be poor, I can prove fraud in the inducement. I can void the prenup. And then what? Then I sue for half." Liam's eyes glittered with a manic intensity. "Half of the marital assets, and since she merged my company with her trust during the marriage, technically, I could claim a piece of the trust." Vork looked at him with a mixture of pity and greed. "You're crazy, but I'm broke. 5,000. Cash up front." Liam handed over the envelope. It was the last of his money. Everything he had left. "Find me something, Silas. Anything." 3 days later, Vork called him. "I found something," Vork said, his voice shaking slightly. "But I'm not emailing it. You come here. And then I'm deleting it. I don't want them tracing this back to me." Liam rushed to Queens. On Vork's computer screen was a scanned document. It looked old, grainy. "What is it?" Liam asked. "It's a medical transcript," Vork explained, "from a private Swiss clinic, 7 years ago, before she met you." Liam squinted at the screen. The patient name was Julianne Vane. The diagnosis code was complex, but the notes were clear. Subject exhibits tendency toward pathological detachment. Recommended therapy for emotional suppression. Patient creates avatars or personas to interact with normal social strata. Liam's heart hammered. "She's crazy. She's clinically detached." "Keep reading." Vork pointed to the bottom. Notes. Patient expresses desire to find a project. A partner who is malleable, ambitious, and fundamentally hollow to test theories of behavioral economics. Target profile established. Liam stared at the words. Malleable, ambitious, fundamentally hollow. "She didn't fall in love with me," Liam whispered, a cold horror seeping into his bones. "I was an experiment. I was a lab rat." "This proves she entered the marriage under false pretenses," Vork said. "She wasn't a wife. She was a scientist observing a specimen. That voids the meeting of minds required for a contract." Liam grabbed a flash drive and plugged it in. "I've got her." "Be careful, Calloway," Vork warned as Liam downloaded the file. "If that's real, she's not just rich. She's a sociopath playing with humans like chess pieces." "She played the wrong piece," Liam snarled. He pocketed the drive. "I'm not going to a lawyer. Lawyers can be bought. I'm going to the one place she can't buy." Where? The media. The Daily Truth was a streaming news network that thrived on scandal. It wasn't the Wall Street Journal, but it had millions of viewers who loved to see the rich and powerful get torn down. The host, Barry Brock, was a man with blindingly white teeth and zero moral compass. He listened to Liam's pitch in the green room, his eyes widening. "So let me get this straight," Brock said, checking his makeup in the mirror. "The heiress to the Vane fortune, the shadow bankers married you as a psychological experiment, and you have the medical docs to prove it." "It's all here," Liam said, patting his jacket pocket. "She defrauded me. She stole my company. I'm the victim of a billionaire's twisted game." This is gold. Brock grinned. We're going live in 10. We'll title it The Trillionaire's Toy. You ready to burn her down? I'm ready. The segment started with dramatic music. Liam sat on the plush chair, looking somber and broken, a carefully cultivated look. Welcome back, Brock said to the camera. We have a shocking exclusive. Liam Callaway, the former CEO of Callaway Capital, is here to tell a story that will make your blood run cold. Liam, tell us about Julianne. Liam launched into his narrative. He painted himself as the hard-working, self-made man who fell for a simple girl. He described the betrayal, the sudden seizure of his assets. She destroyed me because she got bored, Liam said, his voice cracking with rehearsed emotion. But I found out the truth. I wasn't a husband to her. I was a project. And you have evidence? Brock asked. I do. Liam reached into his pocket and pulled out the printed medical records. This is from her time in a Swiss clinic. It details her plan to find a hollow man to manipulate. He held the paper up to the camera. She's a monster, Liam declared. Suddenly, the large screen behind them, which usually displayed the show's logo, flickered. The feed cut out. Static filled the airwaves. Technical difficulties, Brock muttered, tapping his earpiece. Producer, what's going on? The screen turned black. Then a new image appeared. It wasn't static. It was a live video feed. It showed a boardroom. A very familiar boardroom. The old Callaway Capital conference room. Sitting at the head of the table was Julianne Vane. She was wearing a white suit, looking immaculate. She was looking directly into the camera lens. Hello, Liam. Her voice boomed through the studio speakers, crisp and clear. Liam froze. The audience in the studio gasped. Brock looked confused. Is this part of the show? No. Liam stood up. Cut the feed. She's hacking the signal. I'm not hacking Liam, Jules said calmly from the screen. I own the network. The Daily Truth is a subsidiary of Vane Media Group. Did you really think there was a microphone on this planet I couldn't control? Liam looked around wildly. The cameramen were putting their cameras down. The studio lights shifted, spotlighting the screen where Jules sat. You wanted to show the world some documents, Liam, Jules asked. Go ahead. Read the date on that medical report. Liam looked at the paper in his hand. June 14th, 2016. Arthur, Jules said to someone off-screen. Please display Exhibit A. The screen split. On one side was Jules, on the other was a document, a digital forensic report. That document you're holding, Jules explained, her voice echoing like a judge's gavel, was created 3 days ago on a laptop registered to Silas Vork, a man we have on video accepting cash from you. That's a lie, Liam shouted. It's real. It's a forgery, Liam. A trap. I knew you would look for dirt. I knew you would go to the bottom of the barrel. So I planted it. I wrote that profile myself. Fundamentally hollow. It's poetic that you accepted it as the truth without question. Deep down, you know it's what you are. Liam crumbled tall. The paper. You set me up. I tested you, Jules corrected. One last time. I gave you a choice, accept your defeat and move on with your life, or try to destroy me with lies. You chose destruction. Again. Jules leaned forward, her face filling the massive screen. Now let's show the audience the real evidence, the evidence of your fraud. The screen changed again. This time it showed a series of emails, Liam's emails, from 5 years ago. Emails to his old fraternity brothers. Subject, the cash cow. Body found a girl, total doormat. Doesn't care about money, thinks I'm a genius. I'm going to use her to stabilize my home life so I can focus on the fund. Prenup is signed. If she gets annoying, I'll dump her in 5 years with a pittance. She's the perfect placeholder." The studio audience went silent. The cruelty of the words was undeniable. "You didn't marry me for love either, Liam," Jules said softly. "You married me because you thought I was weak. You thought I was a resource to be exploited. But you forgot one thing about resources." "What?" Liam whispered, sweat pouring down his face. "If you mine them too aggressively," Jules said, "the ground collapses underneath you." "Turn it off," Liam screamed at the control booth. "Turn it off. It's live, Liam," Jules said. "Streaming to 4 million people, including the District Attorney of New York." "The DA," Liam paled. "Why?" "Because Jules said picking up a file on her desk. In your desperation to keep Callaway Capital afloat last month, before the merger, you moved money from the client escrow accounts to cover operating expenses. That's embezzlement. That's a federal crime. I intended to put it back. Intent isn't a defense. The wire transfers are here. You stole $3 million from your clients. My auditors found it this morning." The doors to the studio burst open. But it wasn't security. It was the FBI. Men in windbreakers with yellow letters marched onto the set. The cameras were still rolling. This was the highest-rated segment in the network's history. "Liam Callaway," the lead agent announced, flashing a badge. "You are under arrest for securities, fraud, embezzlement, and wire fraud." Liam stumbled back, knocking over his chair. "No, she's doing this. She's framing me." He looked at the screen. Jules was watching him, her expression unreadable. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't gloating. She looked like a scientist, watching a reaction reach its inevitable conclusion. "Jules!" Liam screamed as the agents cuffed him. His hands pulled roughly behind his back. "Jules, help me. I'm your husband." "Please." Jules reached out and pressed a button on her desk. "Goodbye, Liam," she said. The screen went black. As Liam was dragged off the set, shouting obscenities, the host Barry Brock looked at the camera, stunned. He paused for a beat, his producer screaming in his ear to keep going. "Well," Brock stammered, It seems the market has corrected itself. We'll be right back after these messages." In the boardroom, Julianne Vane exhaled a long breath. She didn't feel happy. She didn't feel triumphant. She just felt clean. The infection was gone. Robert Kincaid, who had been sitting quietly in the corner of the room, terrified of her, spoke up. "That was intense, Madame Chairwoman." "It was necessary, Robert," Jules said, standing up and smoothing her white suit. "He was a liability to the firm. Now the liability has been liquidated. What happens to him now?" "He goes to prison," Jules said simply, "for 10 to 15 years. He'll have plenty of time to think about the value of loyalty." She walked to the window looking out over the city that she now silently ruled. "Arthur," she called out. "Yes, Miss Vane?" The large man appeared at the door. "Prepare the jet. I'm done with New York. We're going to Paris. There's a vineyard in Bordeaux that's failing and the owner is arrogant. I think I'd like to buy it." "Very good, ma'am. And regarding the divorce papers, send them to his cell," Jules said, turning away from the window. "Tell him I'll cover the postage. It's the last charity he'll ever get from me." 3 years later, the world had largely forgotten the name Liam Callaway. In the high-speed cycle of New York finance, disgraced CEOs are replaced faster than burnt-out light bulbs. But inside the grey, suffocating walls of the upstate correctional facility, time didn't move fast. It crawled. Liam looked older than his 37 years. The hair that had once been styled by celebrity barbers was thinning and grey. His hands, once manicured for signing million-dollar deals, were rough from mopping the cafeteria floors for 12 cents an hour. It was mail call. A guard tossed a thick manila envelope onto Liam's cot. "Legal mail, Calloway," the guard grunted. Liam's heart jumped. An appeal. Had his lawyer finally found a loophole in the wire fraud charges? He tore the envelope open with trembling fingers. It wasn't an appeal. It was a decree. Final judgment of divorce. He flipped through the pages. It was standard, cold, clinical. The marriage was dissolved. He had no claim to any assets. But at the very back of the packet, clipped to the final page, was a check. Liam stared at it. It was a cashier's check drawn from the Vain Sovereign Trust. The amount, $50,000. Attached was a small handwritten note on heavy cream stationery. The ink was familiar. Liam. "You once told me that 50,000 was a lot of money in the suburbs, and that I should use it to learn a trade. You were right. It is a lot of money where you are. I've deposited this into your commissary account. Consider it charity. Or perhaps severance. I'm moving to Paris permanently. I've purchased the vineyard. It turns out I have a knack for turning sour grapes into something expensive. Do take care of yourself. Julianne." Liam dropped the note. He looked at the check. It was the exact amount he had thrown at her across the mahogany table that rainy afternoon. The pity check. She had waited 3 years to return it. She had waited until he was at rock bottom, until he had absolutely nothing to give him back his own insult. He started to laugh. It was a dry, rasping sound that turned into a sob. He crumpled the check in his fist, pressing it against his forehead. He realized then that he hadn't just lost a wife. He hadn't just lost a fortune. He had lost the game before he even knew he was playing it. Outside the prison walls, a jet painted in midnight blue cut through the clouds, banking east toward the Atlantic, leaving the past and Liam far behind in the dust. And that is the story of Liam Calloway, a man who learned too late that the most expensive things in life, loyalty, love, and integrity, cannot be bought, but they can certainly be sold. He thought he was discarding a burden, but he was actually throwing away the crown. It serves as a brutal reminder to us all: never mistake silence for weakness, and never judge someone's worth by the label on their coat. You never know who is really holding the keys to the castle. If you enjoyed this story of justice, betrayal, and the ultimate revenge, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Did Jules go too far, or did Liam get exactly what he deserved? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. We upload thrilling dramas every week. Until next time, stay humble and watch who you sign papers with.